Each morning at Balmoral, housemaids are required to bow to empty rooms. Even if a royal stepped out just seconds ago, the maid must still curtsy to the vacant space they left behind. This rule has been carried forward for over a century and a half without a single update. But that is only where the strangeness begins. Vacuum cleaners are completely forbidden inside the castle. Instead, maids drop to their knees and scrub the carpets by hand using small horsehair brushes. A single corridor can take nearly an hour to clean this way. Some staff members work shifts stretching 18 hours, all for wages that fall below what the law considers minimum. Speaking without being spoken to is not allowed. A leaked workplace review once described the management as deeply toxic. And yet behind all of this, there was something even more disturbing that caused dozens of workers to walk out at once. Back in the summer of 1852, Prince Albert quietly arranged the purchase of Balmoral after spotting a rain-soaked advertisement. He paid around $32,000 for it, which would be worth roughly $4.4 million in today's money. He did not even mention it to Queen Victoria right away. Within a few years, the original house was demolished and a brand new granite castle stood in its place by 1856. Albert personally sketched the design of the clock tower. Over time, more land was added until the estate grew beyond 53,000 acres, larger in area than both San Francisco and Paris. The grounds include mountains, over 150 buildings, its own power supply, and a private railway line built in 1866 solely to move royal luggage in complete secrecy. Although Balmoral feels deeply tied to Britain, it is not public property. It belongs to the royal family as a private possession. Revenue from selling deer or renting out cottages flows directly to them. Some members of Parliament raised objections, but King Edward VII called it their inescapable refuge and refused to budge. The castle itself looks like something lifted straight from a Scottish fairy tale. Its thick white granite walls catch and reflect the light against the surrounding hills. Prince Albert was personally involved in every aspect of the design. He made sure the windows opened at just the right angle to let in fresh air and had carvings of all 9 of his children placed near the entrance. There are 167 rooms inside, but the corridors were deliberately kept narrow so that family members would cross paths more often. Albert believed it would bring everyone together. The clock tower was modeled after a German castle and was tuned to ring in E-flat, so the sound would not startle the ponies. Some critics at the time called it a giant cold barn, but that criticism did not stop others from copying its style. Within 20 years, around 80% of newly built country homes across Scotland were designed in the same architectural fashion. Queen Victoria herself later wrote that the place smelled of pine and freedom. When the royal family arrives at Balmoral, they do not come with a small group. During hunting season, close to 150 workers live and work on the estate full-time. There are deer stalkers, horse handlers, chefs, cleaners, and even a dedicated piper, whose sole responsibility is to play the bagpipes every morning at 7 o'clock beneath the king's window. Every employee signs a lifelong confidentiality agreement. Violating it means instant dismissal. Maids spend some days working 18 hours straight, polishing hundreds of silver items, and keeping more than 50 fireplaces burning continuously. Each season, the estate burns through 60 tons of birchwood. Meals for the royals are kept simple, often outdoor picnics beside the river where, reportedly, the king still washes his own dishes. But the rules for staff remain rigid. Some workers are not permitted to speak unless addressed directly. Others must live on the estate and participate in the culling of up to 200 deer every winter, paying the staff costs the estate over $3 million annually, with much of that funded through timber sales and renting out cottages to visitors. Every September since 1858, something quite unexpected takes place. Staff and royals gather together for what is called the Gillies Ball. It begins at 7 in the evening, and the king himself opens the dancing with a member of staff. Even someone who washes dishes might find themselves dancing with a prince that night. It is said Prince Philip once spiked the punch with gin to get everyone loosened up. Princess Diana once described the event as feeling like a school prom crossed with Downton Abbey. Even at the ball, rank is quietly enforced. Invitations with gold-edged borders go to senior staff, plain ones to everyone else. At midnight, the royals exit and the room falls into silent bowing. In 1991, a young footman sold details about a barefoot dance at the event and was dismissed immediately. Cameras have been banned ever since. Despite all of this, the ball remains one of the most anticipated events of the year for the staff, partly because it is the one night when they are allowed to address the king by his first name. Because the castle sits deep in the mountains and can only be reached by a single long road, it has always been a useful place for keeping things hidden. Queen Victoria's unusually close bond with her servant John Brown developed here, far from public scrutiny. Edward VIII rehearsed his abdication speech within these walls. When Diana died in 1997, William and Harry were shielded from the news for several hours. But secrets have a way of escaping. In 2019, a cleaner leaked photographs of a treehouse built for the royal children, prompting the palace to ban all photography and cover the windows. Years before that, a former employee had already revealed private details, including the Queen Mother's drink of choice and the fact that Prince Andrew always required exactly 28 golf balls. That worker received $90,000 for the story, but was subsequently sued. Today, even drones are kept out. Aerial barriers were installed in 2024. For the youngest members of the domestic staff, the workday starts long before most people are awake. By 6 in the morning, maids are already in the oldest part of the kitchen polishing more than 200 pieces of silverware. Breakfast is served by 8. Then they carry heavy tea kettles through cold stone corridors, careful not to disturb the royal dogs. Lunch preparation means peeling 18 kilos of potatoes by hand. After that, they change into fresh uniforms and prepare for afternoon tea at 4. Once that is cleared away, they clean the muddy boots left behind from the day's hunt. Most nights, they finally reach their attic bedrooms around 9:45. These are 15-hour shifts, and there is no overtime pay. An old staff manual simply states that loyalty is its own reward. One former maid described the experience as giving your life to a shadow where no one ever said thank you. The ban on vacuum cleaners was enforced because Queen Elizabeth could not stand the noise they made. So every morning, 2 maids would get on their hands and knees and push small horsehair brushes along the floors. Cleaning just one hallway this way took 45 minutes. Dust accumulated so heavily that aprons had to be rinsed twice daily. In 1990, the head housekeeper confirmed that this single rule added 9 hours of extra labor every day, with no increase in pay. Staff said the strain left their wrists, so sore they struggled to hold their cutlery at mealtimes. Still, no one raised a complaint. The castle was spotless to look at from the outside, while quiet suffering spread beneath every freshly brushed rug. Speaking out of turn was genuinely dangerous. In July 1986, a maid who overheard Prince Charles whispering to Diana was immediately hissed at by another servant to act as though she had heard nothing. The following morning, she received a formal written warning. The rule was simple. You must never acknowledge anything the royals say. Do it twice, and you lose your job along with a $250 end-of-season bonus. Over time, staff developed their own silent language, communicating through hand signals during meals. Some said the hallways of Balmoral were quieter than a library, not out of reverence, but out of fear. The wages were not fair for the demands placed on the workers. In 1983, the lowest-ranking housemaid earned around $18,000 before tax, barely $4,000 more than the average British worker, despite living on the property and working 60 hours every week. Some areas of the castle still relied on old-fashioned plumbing, meaning maids were responsible for emptying chamber pots. It took 3 years of service just to be promoted to first housemaid, and that only raised pay to around $21,500. Male gamekeepers, by comparison, earned approximately $26,000. Many women chose to leave after just a year. Royal historian Patrick Thorncroft later described it as a quiet tension that was never spoken aloud but always felt, like standing in freezing cold while wearing silk gloves. One rule in particular shocked every new maid who encountered it. If a royal had just left a room and a maid walked in moments later, she was still required to curtsy to the empty space. The idea was to honor the presence of whoever had just been there. During the 1987 Gillies Ball, staff performed this curtsy 61 times in a single evening. Some bruised their knees so badly that bandages were handed out alongside their serving trays. One maid said it felt like bowing to ghosts, a sign that tradition mattered more than the dignity of the people upholding it. In March 1988, a French magazine published a story that rattled the royal family to its core. It came from a young woman who had worked at Balmoral for just 8 weeks the previous summer. She was paid around $10,000 for her account, more than she would have earned in 8 full years. In exchange, she told everything she had witnessed, from dinner routines to private moments, even which dogs slept closest to Princess Anne's room. Within 2 days, UK tabloids had picked up the story. Millions of people were suddenly reading things that were never meant to leave those walls. Among the stories she shared was one that stood out for its quiet grace. During a formal dinner in August 1987, a guest accidentally drank from the finger bowl, mistaking the rose-scented water inside it for soup. Rather than allowing the man to feel embarrassed, the Queen and every other royal at the table calmly lifted their own bowls and sipped from them as well. Staff counted 17 empty bowls afterward. That small moment revealed something that no official statement ever could. In private, this was a family willing to drink perfume rather than let someone feel ashamed. Not every story was so warm. The maid recalled that during Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's visit in the summer of 1987, the atmosphere was noticeably cold. According to her account, Thatcher was not housed inside the castle with the other guests. Instead, she was placed in a remote cottage on the far edge of the estate. Staff quietly nicknamed it Siberia. The palace denied this entirely, insisting Thatcher had always stayed inside the castle. But observers noted she was absent from the next morning's grouse hunt. Whether it was simply a matter of protocol or something more personal, the tabloids had a field day imagining 2 powerful women locked in icy silence. The picture painted of Charles and Diana was considerably warmer. The maid described them as resembling 2 teenagers newly in love. She regularly saw them holding hands when they believed no one was watching. Charles would personally fetch Diana's coat before a picnic. Diana quietly slipped tips to the young stable boys. But beneath the tenderness, the harder realities of the household persisted. Housemaids were still earning just $75 a week, with wages sometimes going unpaid altogether. Breaks were announced by a bell, just as they had been in the 1800s. Kindness existed in the corridors, but the old rules